Harry and Meghan Markle will soon be back in Australia. The Herald Sun reporting the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are reportedly planning to visit Sydney and Melbourne next month. It'll be their first visit since the 2018 Invictus Games.
Amid controversies surrounding the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's wedding anniversary, British journalist Valentine Low has uncovered a shocking palace secret. The journalist, who served as the royal correspondent for The Times for many years, revealed what the palace told the Queen about how Meghan felt after her Australia tour. What did he reveal, and how has it changed the palace dynamics? Join us as we take a deep dive into this story, the brief that started it all. In November 2018, Queen Elizabeth II sat completely alone in her deeply secluded private study at Buckingham Palace. On the massive polished mahogany desk before her lay no standard red boxes of state, no urgent diplomatic cables from foreign ministries, and no official staged photographs meant for public distribution. Instead, resting right under the soft glow of a single desk lamp was a highly confidential, unmarked leather binder containing a strictly restricted internal report. Standing entirely stiff across from the sovereign was a woman who had served the British monarchy with absolute, unquestioning loyalty for 17 long years. Samantha Cohen, the Queen's trusted assistant private secretary, was not there to deliver standard pleasantries or good news. For 16 exhausting days, the eyes of the entire civilized world had been glued exclusively to the South Pacific. The official royal tour of Australia, New Zealand, Tonga, and Fiji had been publicly hailed by the global press as an absolute, unprecedented triumph for the Crown. The international press corps could simply not get enough of the beautifully stage-managed fairy tale. They splashed stunning photos of a radiant, newly pregnant Meghan Markle in flowing designer dresses across the front pages of hundreds of newspapers worldwide. They broadcasted endless loops of video footage showing Prince Harry beaming with absolute pride directly beside his new bride. They recorded the massive cheering crowds packed tightly outside the iconic Sydney Opera House, and they praised the new Duchess for her seemingly effortless charm, her homemade banana bread, and her highly photogenic interactions with native koalas. To the ordinary public watching from afar, Meghan Markle was the greatest modern asset the House of Windsor had seen in a generation, a magnetic figure driving record-breaking media engagement with younger, highly diverse global audiences who had previously ignored the monarchy. But behind the heavy, soundproof oak doors of the traveling royal household, entirely away from the flashing cameras and the roaring spectators, a completely different, deeply terrifying and shocking event was happening. Samantha Cohen had just stepped off the royal plane from Sydney, and what she had witnessed across those 16 days had no precedent in her 2 decades of dedicated palace service. The internal atmosphere inside the closed staff bubble had grown so toxic, so intensely fractured, and so emotionally devastating that the aides, protection officers, and secretaries who traveled with the couple had quietly formed a traumatized psychological alliance, giving themselves a haunting, defensive nickname, the Sussex Survivors Club. Now, the brilliant investigative journalism of veteran royal correspondent Valentine Low has finally uncovered the explosive, deeply hidden details of exactly what Samantha Cohen reported to the Queen during that fateful, top-secret briefing. It was a private debriefing that would quietly, permanently, and irrevocably alter how Buckingham Palace managed the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, triggering a slow, cold strategy that eventually built the explosive launchpad for Megxit. What did the Queen really look at inside that secret dossier? What were the exact 11 words whispered by Meghan Markle that sent a shiver down the spine of the palace establishment? And how did a tour that looked like an absolute fairy tale to the public become the opening battle of an all-out civil war behind the palace gates? The answer is beyond surprising. To truly understand why Queen Elizabeth II requested a private, comprehensive briefing immediately after the 2018 autumn tour concluded, you have to look past the public timeline and look closely at the hidden anxieties building within the palace walls. Harry and Meghan had been married for just 5 short months. On paper, the experiment of integrating a glamorous, highly independent American actress into the rigid, thousand-year-old machinery of the British monarchy was working beautifully. The Queen had publicly shown immense affection and support for Meghan, breaking ancient protocols to invite her onto the exclusive royal train for a joint engagement in Cheshire just weeks after the royal wedding. Yet, despite the public smiles, the Queen's legendary intuition was already tingling. Her Majesty knew that the sudden transition from Hollywood celebrity to institutional servant was a dangerous, psychologically jarring path. Fearing that the intense pressure would overwhelm the newlyweds, the Queen made a highly unusual personal request. She turned to Samantha Cohen, her deeply respected assistant private secretary, who was on the absolute brink of a well-deserved retirement. The Queen personally asked Cohen to delay her departure from royal service, stay inside the palace framework, and temporarily embed herself as the organizational guide for the newly formed Sussex household. As Valentine Low reveals in his groundbreaking book Courtiers, this was not an act of hostile surveillance or an imposition of palace control. It was an act of profound grandmotherly love and institutional protection. The Queen recognized that something was already starting to fray behind the scenes in Kensington Palace. She assigned her most experienced, level-headed courtier to steady the ship and fix the internal communication problems before they could spill out into the mainstream media. The multi-nation tour of Australia was designed to be the ultimate testing ground for this new arrangement. The first crack at the Sydney Opera House. On October 15, 2018, the Sussexes touched down in Sydney, and the global media went into an absolute frenzy. The intentional announcement of Meghan's pregnancy landed at the exact moment their feet touched Australian soil, ensuring that every single public walkabout would dominate international news feeds for the next 2 weeks. The public warmth was palpable. Thousands of everyday citizens lined the iconic steps of the Sydney Opera House, standing hours in the blazing sun just to catch a fleeting glimpse of the new royal couple, holding up handmade signs, flags, and bouquets of flowers. But inside the secure royal convoy, the atmosphere was shockingly cold. According to an anonymous palace source quoted by Valentine Low, as the vehicle approached the venue and the massive roaring crowd came into view, the Duchess of Sussex looked out the window and did not see a beautiful display of public loyalty. Instead, she turned to a senior member of her staff and said something that completely shocked everyone. Quietly, but with absolute clarity, the new Duchess said, "What are they all doing here? It's silly." The aide standing directly next to her was completely stunned by the comment, momentarily losing their breath. Trying to gently guide the new royal back to the reality of her position, the aide replied that the thousands of people outside had gathered because they genuinely admired her, supported the monarchy, and loved the historic institution she was now officially representing on the global stage. The Duchess reportedly offered no response, her face turning blank as she prepared to step out into the sunlight. The vehicle doors opened, the camera shutters clicked by the millions, and the world saw a waving, radiant icon of the crown. But Samantha Cohen, watching silently from the baseline, noted the moment down as the very first significant crack in the fairy tale facade. As the grueling tour pushed deep into its first week, the relentless physical demands of royal duty began to collide directly with the expectations of the Duchess. Royal tours are not vacation trips. They are highly synchronized, exhausting marathons of public service. Every single hour is accounted for, requiring the royals to shake hands with thousands of complete strangers, listen to local community leaders, cut ceremonial ribbons, and maintain absolute emotional enthusiasm without a single moment of privacy. It was during one of these intense, crowded public walkabouts that Meghan Markle allegedly muttered the 11 words that would quickly become the most infamous, widely quoted line of the entire tour within the palace staff network. Frustrated by the heat, the exhausting pace, and the endless line of ordinary citizens waiting to touch her hand, the Duchess turned to her team and whispered, I can't believe I'm not getting paid for this." She genuinely believed she should have been receiving an independent commercial fee for doing public walkabouts with the everyday citizens who had traveled miles to see her. Those 11 words were never intended to be heard by the public or the press corps, but inside the tight, high-stress bubble of a royal tour, secrets travel faster than light. The whisper was overheard by an aide, and within hours, it spread like wildfire through the entire staff network. By the time the royal entourage boarded the charter plane to the Kingdom of Tonga, every single secretary, protection officer, and logistics manager on the trip had heard the comment. For the seasoned courtiers traveling with the Sussexes, that single comment about payment crystallized a terrifying reality that they had been desperately struggling to articulate for months. It became blindingly obvious to the palace staff that the Duchess of Sussex did not comprehend the fundamental core premise of the British monarchy. She did not view walkabouts, community charity visits, or diplomatic receptions as the actual job she had married into. To a traditional royal, these public duties are a form of sacred, non-negotiable service. They have no individual fee attached to them because they are funded entirely by the sovereign grant and the deep, historic trust of the public, an institution that provides magnificent palaces, elite security, international status, and immense privilege in direct exchange for a lifetime of selfless public service. But to Meghan, coming from the high-stakes commercial world of Hollywood entertainment, these appearances felt like massive promotional events for global brand appearances that under normal entertainment contracts would command millions of dollars in appearance fees. She felt she was being exploited by the palace machinery, and that profound misunderstanding began to breed a deep, toxic resentment that poisoned the working atmosphere of the tour. By the arrival of the second week of the tour, the hidden friction had escalated from quiet whispers into a state of structural panic. The staff members were visibly fraying at the edges, operating on minimal sleep and maximum anxiety. Timelines were consistently running late, transportation schedules were falling into chaos, and the personal protection officers were utterly exhausted from managing the erratic, unpredictable demands of the principal royals. But that was only the beginning. It was during this chaotic stretch in the South Pacific that the professional relationship between the Sussexes and their communications secretary, Jason Knauf, effectively died. Knauf was a highly competent, widely respected media strategist who had navigated the complex waters of Kensington Palace for years with absolute dignity. He had worked tirelessly to protect Harry and Meghan from unfair media intrusion, but during the Australia tour, he found himself trapped in a nightmare of conflicting instructions and emotional volatility. Valentine Low's investigation highlights that the mutual trust between Knauf and the couple completely dissolved during those 16 days. While Knauf would remain formally employed by the household until March 2019, he was effectively frozen out of the inner decision-making circle. This profound breakdown of professional trust in Australia laid the groundwork for the historic corporate explosion that occurred years later in 2021, when Knauf officially wrote a detailed internal email to his boss, Simon Case, outlining serious allegations of bullying and intimidation against the Duchess. The psychological toll on the traveling staff was so severe that it forever changed the internal culture of the palace. Aides returned to London describing the experience not as a historic career highlight, but as a miserable, deeply traumatic deployment. It was during this specific period that the informal, tight-knit group known as the Sussex Survivors Club was born among the secretaries and assistants. They used the term with dark, survivalist humor to describe anyone who had endured a direct, high-intensity confrontation with the royal couple behind closed doors. Whispers and unconfirmed rumors began circulating through the wider palace network about the terrifying extent of the backstage anger. One of the most famous, enduring pieces of palace gossip from that tour involved an alleged incident where a member of the staff accidentally served a beverage at the wrong temperature or failed to execute a logistical detail perfectly, causing the Duchess to allegedly throw a cup of hot tea in a fit of rage. While the Sussex's official representatives have always categorically and fiercely denied these allegations, describing them as a disgusting, coordinated smear campaign designed to destroy her reputation, the undeniable reality documented by Valentine Low is that the staff returned to the UK feeling completely broken, unsupported, and emotionally depleted. But the new Duchess did not stop there. The ultimate philosophical divide between Meghan Markle and the ancient institution she had joined was captured in a single chilling four-word phrase that Valentine Low explicitly attributes to a senior member of the household staff. When word finally reached the Duchess that her traveling team was deeply unhappy, under immense psychological stress, and felt they were being treated with a lack of basic human dignity, Meghan's reported response was swift and uncompromising. "It's not my job to coddle people." When Samantha Cohen eventually carried this specific quote into the Queen's private study, it cut far deeper than any individual argument over scheduling or walkabouts. For 70 years, the entire historic reign of Queen Elizabeth II had been built on the absolute opposite premise. The Queen firmly believed that the fundamental job of a working royal was precisely to coddle people, to make the everyday citizen feel seen, to make the lonely charity worker feel valued, to ensure the staff felt respected, and to project an image of steady, empathetic care to the nation. To the old guard of the palace, Meghan's dismissive attitude revealed a stark corporate worldview that was completely incompatible with the self-sacrificial duties of the British crown. The fairy tale was officially over. The battle for containment had begun. The silent breakdown of the 2018 briefing. When Samantha Cohen stood before Queen Elizabeth II in that quiet West London study, she did not just speak from memory. She presented a meticulously structured overview of the structural, emotional, and financial cracks that had formed across the Commonwealth. Valentine Low's investigative deep dive reveals that the substance of this explosive, high-stakes briefing was divided into 4 highly confidential areas of institutional concern. The first section dealt directly with the cultural disconnect symbolized by the Sydney Opera House and walkabout comments. Cohen explained to the sovereign that the new Duchess did not view royal duties through the lens of public service, but rather as individual, high-value promotional appearances for a centralized personal brand. The second section detailed the total operational collapse with Jason Knopf and the communications team, warning that the household's high staff turnover rate was becoming an unsustainable administrative emergency. The third section exposed the logistical friction caused by the Sussex's insistence on bypassing traditional, highly vetted Buckingham Palace advisors in favor of importing their own external American publicity teams and personal friends, creating a chaotic parallel chain of command that British diplomats found impossible to coordinate. The fourth and most sensitive section of all touched upon the volatile intersection of family dynamics and global pressure. Meghan was navigating a high-profile pregnancy, while Harry was operating under a cloud of intense protective anxiety. The volatile combination was driving erratic, reactive decision-making that the existing palace machinery could neither predict nor influence. As the details of that fateful 2018 briefing began to ripple outward through the highest echelons of the palace establishment, other highly unusual incidents from the tour began to make sense to the senior courtiers. One of the most fiercely debated, unverified pieces of gossip to emerge from that chaotic trip involved an alleged high-intensity falling out with global sports icon David Beckham at the Sydney Invictus Games. Beckham had traveled thousands of miles to Australia as a high-profile ambassador for the Games, eager to show his unwavering support for Prince Harry's signature charitable achievement. Yet, according to whispers circulating among the tour party, Prince Harry suddenly and inexplicably refused to be photographed anywhere near Beckham during the events. The sudden cold shoulder left the Beckham camp completely blindsided and deeply insulted. Rumors later surfaced, suggesting that the sudden snub had been heavily driven by unverified suspicions within the Sussex household that information regarding the couple's private logistics was being leaked to the media by individuals connected to the football star's inner circle. While these stories have remained classified as unconfirmed palace gossip, they perfectly illustrate the toxic atmosphere of paranoia and isolation that was rapidly consuming the newly formed Sussex household during their time in the Southern Hemisphere. Regardless of how shocking it was, the long-term institutional consequences of the Australia tour did not result in a sudden public punishment. Queen Elizabeth II was a master of institutional survival, and she understood that dramatic public interventions would only fuel the media firestorm. Instead, the palace machinery initiated a quiet, highly strategic containment operation. Samantha Cohen's temporary contract was quietly extended by personal command of the Queen, forcing the veteran aide to delay her retirement a second time, just to keep a steady, experienced hand on the wheel of the Sussex household. But the most lasting, permanent structural change to emerge from the ashes of that 2018 tour was the creation of a highly confidential internal document titled Guidelines for Private Secretaries and Heads of Teams. This document, which Valentine Low uncovers the existence of, acted effectively as a modernized courtier code, a strict, legally binding rulebook explicitly designed to protect palace staff from the gray areas of employment that the Sussex household had so aggressively exposed. The guidelines clearly defined the exact boundaries of what a member of the royal family could and could not demand of their administrative staff. It established strict protocols regarding communication hours, formalized lines of internal authority, and created explicit psychological safety boundaries for protection officers, secretaries, and press aides. The document has never been released to the public, remaining a heavily guarded state secret. It stands as permanent, written proof that the behavior witnessed in Australia had forced the British monarchy to completely rewrite its internal labor rules for the first time in modern history. To understand exactly why this historical briefing is bubbling back to the surface with such immense force right now, you have to look at the catastrophic events that have unfolded for the Sussex brand across the international stage. The ghosts of the 2018 Australia tour have officially come back to haunt them, and the parallel lines are absolutely chilling. Earlier this year, Harry and Meghan attempted to recreate the magic of their initial success by flying into Australia for a high-profile, unchoreographed visit tied to the Invictus Games framework. The Sussex media relations team worked around the clock to pump out press releases describing the trip as a deeply impactful, meaningful, and historically significant triumph. They tried to stitch together every available piece of footage to present an image of cheering crowds and uninhibited global popularity. But independent data analysts and web traffic monitors quickly exposed a devastating truth that no amount of PR spin could cover up. According to verified digital metrics, public engagement with Sussex-related content actually suffered a massive, unprecedented decline during the very week of their visit. The official palace line of defense, that "you had to be there in the room to feel the energy," completely collapsed when forced to confront cold, hard numbers. The public was simply tuning out. To make matters infinitely worse, the baseline security screening routines that protect working royals completely broke down. Meghan was photographed smiling and taking a high-profile selfie with a visiting Finnish politician who was actively facing severe, highly publicized mainstream allegations of workplace sexual harassment and deep-seated racism. A standard functioning communications team would have flagged the individual instantly and blocked the photo opportunity. The fact that the selfie went live proved to the world that nobody is adequately managing the room before the Duchess steps into it, leaving her entirely exposed to avoidable reputational damage. If the mathematical failure of the secondary Australia trip was a quiet warning, their subsequent appearance in Geneva, Switzerland, was an absolute public humiliation that completely shattered the Duchess's composure. Meghan traveled to the international diplomatic hub to deliver a major high-stakes address on global health initiatives in front of some of the most senior world health officials on Earth. The speech was designed to position her as a serious, sophisticated geopolitical voice operating on the world stage. But what actually happened was shocking. The entire event descended into a logistical nightmare. The address was delivered in a largely empty public square, with rows of vacant seats staring back at the podium. The lack of an audience was bad enough, but the true disaster struck on the digital front just 12 hours before she walked out to the microphone. Back in California, the Sussex social media operation published an intimate, soft-focus lifestyle wardrobe photograph of her 4-year-old daughter. The hyper-commercialized, carefully curated image of immense wealth and privilege directly and entirely contradicted the heavy humanitarian message of economic equity and public health struggle that Meghan was about to deliver in her speech. The digital contradiction landed across international media instantly, completely overtaking the news cycle before she could even finish her opening remarks. Close observers reporting from the ground in Geneva noted that the humiliation was visible in her face, her voice tight with an underlying unmistakable anger, as she realized the strategy had completely imploded. This rapid succession of public relations disasters has completely destroyed the secret, high-stakes plan that was being quietly orchestrated behind the scenes in London. For months, top-level political journalists had been whispering about the existence of Project Thaw, a highly controversial top-secret operation involving King Charles III and a small, select group of senior British civil servants. The goal of the project was to establish a slow, carefully monitored pathway to ease Prince Harry back into a quasi-official, deniable public role in the United Kingdom, maximizing his diplomatic utility while keeping his volatile commercial brand at a safe distance from the core functioning of the monarchy. The project had recently moved out of the shadows when King Charles delivered his major speech at the state opening of Parliament, inserting a highly specific, urgent pledge to tackle rising domestic anti-Semitism. In what analysts view as a perfectly synchronized media play, Prince Harry published a massive, lengthy opinion piece in the left-leaning New Statesman magazine that very same week, echoing his father's warnings almost word for word, while Team Sussex frantically issued statements denying any internal coordination and claiming the matching timing was a pure coincidence. The strategic alignment was blindingly obvious to everyone inside the British establishment. But the temporary alliance has been violently and permanently crushed. The simultaneous exposure of their failing financial firepower in Montecito, the total social freeze executed by their former Hollywood A-list friends on their wedding anniversary, and the catastrophic leak of the 2018 Australia briefing data have made Harry completely toxic to the British government. Prince William and his strategic team have used the unfolding chaos to build an impenetrable ring of iron around the ailing king. William has made it completely clear to the cabinet that any attempts to execute Project Thaw or grant Harry any form of official institutional access will be met with a total institutional veto from the incoming sovereign's office. The secrets carried inside Samantha Cohen's leather binder back in 2018 have officially become the permanent structural bricks used to wall Prince Harry out of the kingdom for good. The dramatic, historic revelations of this tumultuous week have made one single truth undeniable to every royal watcher across the globe. The grand post-royal Sussex experiment has officially run completely out of gas. By allowing the hidden history of the 2018 Australia tour to spill out into the open alongside their current public relations failures, they have handed their institutional rivals the ultimate weapon. The fairy tale that began with billions of viewers cheering at the altar has concluded in a state of absolute, self-inflicted isolation. The 11 quiet words whispered on the steps of the Sydney Opera House have transformed into a permanent, lifelong sentence of exile. What are your thoughts on Valentine Low's revelations? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.